And we are back with some more cards, the last of the cards from the madness at the Darkmoon Faire. This time we got the neutral cards, of course, because that's always what I end with. So let's jump straight into them. So we got the Darkmoon Rabbit, 10 cost 1/1 beast with rush and poisonous. Also damages the minions next to whomever it attacks. So it's very good at basically clearing out a relatively biggish board with big minions, which makes it very, very situational, especially for standard, because standard generally doesn't have like a deck where they just have a bunch of like 7 cost, 8 cost minions. So this has no real use. Very situational, very easy to it's honestly just not good. Divine shields are amazing against this. It can't do anything to it. At least it ends up damaging the minion next to it. If you got taunts on the edge, it has to hit those, which makes the what is it called? I think isn't there? They should really have a special word for it. For the also damages the minions next to whoever this attacks. They really should have like a name for that, but they really don't, which makes me a little sad because I really think they should. But anyway, if there's taunts on the edges, it doesn't do as well, obviously, because it only hits 2 targets instead of 3, and it's just generally not that great of a card. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10, and you probably won't see it this expansion. Fleet Hoof Pearl Tusk, 5 cost 4/4 beast with rush. If you corrupt it, it gains +4/+4. Honestly, this card is pretty good because a 5 cost 8/8 rush, for example, is honestly very strong. Stats are a lot over what it should be for a 5 cost, especially. So it's honestly very strong. Probably relatively good in a control deck because this is a lot of corrupt. Honestly, corrupt cards just in general seem to be pretty good in a control deck because control decks generally run bigger stuff, so it's easier to, or more expensive cards, I should say. So then it's easier to corrupt stuff if you have corrupt cards in your deck. And also, corrupt is terrible at top decking, so it's terrible in aggro. So honestly, I think it could control the board relatively well with being a 5 cost 8/8 rush. And it could go in to probably a few different decks, I would guess. But I'm going to rate this at a 7 out of 10. And type of decks, you may see it in like a Hunter because of the Beast tag. So it could be pretty decent in a Hunter deck. Maybe Highlander Hunter would maybe use it. And maybe some other kind of control deck, maybe Priest maybe would use it. Because it's got a lot of health, you can heal that back. Just a thought. We got Horrendous Growth, 2 cost 2/2, corrupt game +1/+1, can be corrupted endlessly. So it gets bigger and bigger, but the cost doesn't go up. So, I mean, since it's only 2 costs, it's very easy to corrupt, which means it can snowball very easily, which is really nice. So I think this card is honestly pretty good. And I don't know exactly what type of decks it would be good in. It could be okay in aggro, especially like a secret aggro deck, for example, because most of those cards are going to be like 3 cost, 4 cost, maybe a few 5. And then each time you do that, this is getting bigger and bigger, and then at some point you just play like a 2 cost 11/11 or something like that. Maybe it's set up for a combo deck. It could be. It's honestly relatively good. I honestly do like the card because of the gimmick that it has, that it can be corrupted endlessly, which I think just makes it pretty darn good. So I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. Type of decks you'll see it in, honestly not 100% sure where it would go. It could probably do okay in a control, and it could maybe do okay in a combo. deck where it is the combo. Because maybe you do something along the lines of you play this, it lives, and then you like double its health and inner fire or something and win. Maybe something like that. Just a thought. I don't know. There might be. I don't think there is a way to give them charge really anymore. So, it kind of sucks. But we got the Claw Machine. 6 cost 6/3 mech with rush, death rattle, draw a minion, and give it +3/+3. This is honestly just a relatively good card on its own. Death rattle just makes it a whole lot better because that is a pretty big buff to whatever minion you draw. So I think that's just good there for sure as well. And the rush lets you get that death rattle probably pretty instantly because you're using it on probably a 6 health minion. And most likely that will obviously have more than 3 attack. It is honestly pretty darn good. I do like it. I think I'll give it a 7 out of 10. And I think it could go in probably like Death Rattle Hunter maybe, or some kind of Death Rattle deck probably. I think it could work out pretty well with that. Not a Rush Warrior. No, probably most likely Death Rattle Hunter, or it could be honestly a pretty decent control option card as well. Optimistic Ogre. 5 cost 6/7, 50% chance to attack the correct enemy. I mean, it's okay. 5 cost 6/7 is a little better than what you're used to with the Boulder Fist Ogre, which is a 6 cost 6/7, but I'd rather pay the extra mana to have a 100% chance to attack the right thing, because with the 50% chance being wrong, right, whatever, it doesn't feel good, because I feel like even though it's 50% chance, it ends up attacking the wrong thing way too often. So it just feels bad to play, really. Especially with the Sunbeam Ogre, or what I think is what it was called. But it like fell asleep like all the time. It was ridiculous. So it's okay, but I don't think it's good enough to really go anywhere. So I will give it a 5 out of 10. And type of deck you'll see it in. You might see it around with experimentation, but I wouldn't count on it being around for too long. We got Strongman. 7 costs 6/6 taunt. Corrupt. This now costs 0. Honestly, pretty good, especially with Corrupt. It's an amazing card for probably multiple decks. Anything that has anything big is just good. So like Big Warrior, for example, would use this pretty darn well, and they'd like it. Maybe a Highlander Hunter would maybe use it too. None of the Demon Hunters would use it. No Demon Hunter deck would. Because even Soul Fragment I don't think has really anything over 7. I think their highest might be 6. Not sure. Overall, it's not bad. It's honestly relatively decent. I do like it. I think it's pretty strong still. So I will give it a 7 out of 10. And the type of decks you'll see it in is probably Highlander Hunter or some kind of control deck. Something like that. Banana Vendor. 3 costs 2/4. Battlecry. Add 2 bananas to each player's hand. Pretty decent value card. I mean, your opponent gets it too, but I still think it's fine because it's a 2/4 then for 3. So it's not making anything horribly unbalanced because you both get it first off. And the 2/4 is a little bit bigger, so it kind of makes up for it a little bit more on kind of that your opponent's getting it too. So I mean, it's not great. So, I mean, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Don't know what kind of deck this would go into. I don't think it would really be around in any deck because there's not any deck that really needs the bananas, like for spells, for example. So he might not be around. We got the Carnival Clown. 9 cost 4/4 taunt. Battlecry, summon 2 copies of this. If you corrupt it, which is very difficult, you fill your board with copies. Very difficult to pull off the corrupt, but if you pull off the corrupt, my goodness, it's very difficult to deal with. Your opponent basically has to have a board clear card to wipe out the Carnival Clowns. Otherwise, they lose, pretty much. So most likely, Carnival Clown would go into, like, a combo deck that is Carnival Clown. Like, either, like, there's a few options where you could go with it, where you go with, like, some kind of hand buff deck, where you're buffing up the Carnival Clown, and then you corrupt him, and then you have really big Carnival Clowns. Or you could play it in maybe Resurrection Priest, where you fill your board with Carnival Clowns. If they die, then you've got options to resurrect it back. And you don't actually do, like, hand buffing them. Which option do I think it's going to go with? Honestly, I'm not sure which direction it will go with. Could go either one. But I do think it's a very strong card because that is a lot to deal with and it's very difficult. So I'm going to go 8 out of 10 on this one. And I really do think it's either going to be Resurrection Priest that will go in, or it's going to go into like a hand buff, probably like Paladin, possibly. And I think the deck that will be it's going to be like maybe not even in specifically a Resurrection Priest. It might be make a whole new deck just called Clown, and then the class Clown whatever, Clown Priest, Clown Warrior, I don't know, Clown something. Ooh, that's right, they are taunts. Do we still have that taunt? I think we have a lot of that taunt stuff too still. So like Into the Fray would be really good with this probably. Oh man. There are options that you can go with this, and I like it. We got the Circus Medic. We got 4 costs, 3/5, Battlecry, restore 4 health. If you corrupt it, you deal 4 damage instead. This card's very interesting because the corrupt doesn't necessarily help. Most of the time, maybe sometimes you want the healing, sometimes you want the damage. But most of the time, if you're playing it later in the game, most likely you're getting to deal 4. And generally what I would rather have is I would want it corrupted earlier, and maybe later in the game I'm going to need the health restore. So it's in a pretty weird spot of how you want to play around it. Because most of the time, once you get later into the game, it's going to get corrupted like a lot of the time. Because stuff you just have later on is bigger. And 4 isn't that difficult to corrupt. So it's relatively easy to corrupt, and it just happens then. So it's in a very strange spot. And I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Because I still think it's fine. I don't know if there's necessarily a deck that would need/want this. But there might be that I'm unaware of. I don't think it needs to. I don't know if there's not necessarily a deck that springs to my mind right away. So we got Circus Amalgam, 4 cost, 4/5, all minion types with taunt. I absolutely love this card. It's great for like basically any specific minion type deck. Like for example, it's very good for any beast deck, any demon. It would be great in a dragon deck. It's super good in a menagerie deck for the warrior. So I think it's honestly a really good card, even without any buffs whatsoever. So like, without getting buffed at all for being in like the menagerie warrior, it's still a very well statted card. I really like it. It's Like, it's better than Shenshi Shieldmaster. Shenshi Shieldmaster is a 4-cost 3/5 with taunt and has no minion type. This has all minion types and gets an extra attack. So Shenshi Shieldmaster is just bad now, basically. Well, he was bad before. No one ran him that much, but this could very well get ran. And I really like it. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. And most likely you'll probably see it in the Menagerie, Warrior, or any other type of... Probably a lot of decks you'll see it in. You might see it in a Beast Hunter if there's a Beast Hunter. Probably wouldn't be bad in any type of dragon deck. It'd be good in basically anything. Murloc deck, if that comes back around, throw that in there. We got the Costumed Entertainer. 2-cost, 1/2, Battlecry, give a random minion in your hand, +2/+2. This could go very well with the Carnival Clown. That could honestly combo relatively well with that card. So it just, it could work. It could work for that. Just because of, you buff it, and then it's a lot harder to deal with. Yes, it's random, so you kind of have to, like, make sure he's kind of the only thing maybe in your hand. So then you can get the buff to him. But it's not bad. It's a big buff, too. Like, even if it was like a 1-cost 1/1, you give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. It's a big buff, because 2/2 is generally can generally just be a 2-cost minion. Or at least what it used to be. It's not anymore. But it used to be. So, I still think it's really good. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Type of deck you'll see it in. Maybe the clown deck. You might not see it around anywhere else, but the clown deck, maybe you'll see it there. We got the Darkmoon Didgeridoo thing. Didgeridoo! No, it's not a didgeridoo. 3-cost 3/2 mech with Divine Shield. If you corrupt it, it gains Rush. Honestly, that Rush is very useful. Even a 3-cost 3/2 Divine Shield isn't bad, so even if you don't even play it without the corrupt, it's not a bad play. It's just I don't see mechs around too much anymore. It might fit into some other kind of deck where it's just control deck where the corrupt with the Rush it really helps, because then it's a lot more of a controlling card because you can play it and instantly take something out on the board. And then also still leave it with board presence. It's not bad. It's really not bad. I do very much like it. I'm going to give it a... I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. Type of decks you'll see it in. Maybe you'll see it in like a control, most likely, for example. Would be my guess of where it's going to go. But that's all I've got, is probably just some kind of control, maybe. Darkmoon Statue, 3-cost 0/5. Your other minions have +1 attack. If you corrupt this gains 4 attack. The Darkmoon Statue not being corrupted is terrible. Being corrupted is really good. Because the 3-cost 4/5 is already amazing. And then you also buff your minions +1 attack. So really, it's a raid leader that's way bigger. But cannot be played on turn 3. Generally, most people don't play Raid Leader anyway. The buff is nice on Raid Leader, obviously, but he's way too small. This is a decent-sized body with also giving minions +1 attack, which most likely then they can take advantage of because this is a bit harder to kill, especially if it has that 4 attack. Yeah, 0/5 might be okay, but your opponent can attack with basically no repercussion because it has no attack. If it has that 4 attack, your opponent has to, when they're attacking it, they they get hurt still now in some way, at least. So that corrupt is honestly very important and very good for the statue. So I think it's a 7 out of 10 card. Very good, I think, for like a control deck. Don't really have a specific class in mind of where it would go, but honestly, I just think it's a relatively good control card because it gives you a lot more value of a 3-cost 4/5 on the board, plus giving your other minions more attack to help control the board even more. So I think it's a very good control option. We have the Derailed Coaster. 5-cost 3/2 Battlecry. You summon a 1/1 rider with Rush for each minion in your hand. I'm honestly not the biggest fan of this card. It's 5 for a 3/2, which is very small. And then you summon 1/1 riders with Rush for each minion in your hand. Which generally, it kind of also tells your opponent how many minions you have in your hand. Which is information that they can use against you most likely as well. And plus, a 1/1 really isn't much of worth. Especially when you're getting 1/1 rushes that give away information. So it's not the best card. I like the picture. I will say I like the picture. But that's about where the compliments of this card end. I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. And you probably won't see it this expansion. We got the Fantastic Firebird. 4-cost 3/5 elemental with Wind Fury. This is honestly could be another good option for Mage with their elemental deck with the Grand Finale. Because it's not a super big elemental, but most likely it's not what you're going to use near the end to play Grand Finale the next turn. Most likely you'll use this to kind of control a little bit to get to that later point. Which a 4-cost 3/5 with Wind Fury honestly isn't a bad option. Wind Fury you don't gets honestly I think overvalued sometimes. And in this instance, I think it's sitting at a good spot. Or, for example, I've seen like a 3-cost 2/3 Wind Fury. It's like the minion's way too small and it can't really do anything. Like with the Walking Fountain, they did that right too. That was a good spot for it. So I think this card is pretty decent. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. And then I think it goes into that Elemental Mage with Grand Finale. Gaiuri Worm. Gayu. I don't know how to pronounce that. 3-cost 3/2 Elemental. If you played an Elemental last turn, you deal 3 damage. So, I mean, it's not a bad card. But it very much goes off of elemental themed stuff again, which is good for the mage again. So obviously that's kind of the direction that I think this card is going as well, is that mage elemental deck with the Grand Finale. It's probably going to head over there because I think that's pretty fair for it to go over there. So, I mean, the 3-cost 3/2 stat line to just sit there is iffy, but then the elemental played last turn to deal 3 helps it a lot. Especially if you play this on curve, so turn 2, you play an elemental, and then turn 3 you play this. I think that's a very good turn 3 play. Especially if your opponent has something on the board that you can deal 3 damage to and kill it. That will be a big board swing in your favor. So I think this card is decent. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. And I think it's going to, for the type of deck, I think it's going to be in that Elemental Mage with that Grand Finale. I think that's very much going to be an option of where it will go. We have the Inconspicuous Rider. 3-cost 2/2 Battlecry. You cast a secret from your deck. I compare this card a lot with Mad Scientist. Mad Scientist is one cheaper, but instead of it being a battle cry, it's a death rattle. Same exact stats otherwise, though. Honestly, Inconspicuous Rider is honestly better. Even though it costs one more. The battle cry is just so much better. Because with battle cry, you get the secret faster, and it has no chance of being silenced. Because, like, if you're playing a secret deck, and you got Mad Scientist, because it's a death rattle, it can be silenced, which means you may get nothing out of it. Which is why the battle cry is so useful and so good. So it's much better than Mad Scientist. And just, it's such a good card, honestly. I think it will very easily see play. And I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. This card is very likely going to be in 2 different secret decks. I think it could be in a Mage aggro secret deck and a Hunter secret deck. Probably, most likely also aggro. And then maybe even a Control Mage you can throw it in as well that has just a lot of secrets in that control deck. We got the Knife Vendor. 4 cost, 3/4, Battlecry, deal 4 damage to each hero. The dealing damage to both heroes is generally only useful for maybe 1 or 2 classes. So most likely I see this being more useful for Priest or Warlock. Where with Warlock you're maybe playing a deck where it's like self-inflicting type of deck. Where it's like, oh, if you take damage on your turn you get something. And with Priest, you could most likely heal it back. So, and then especially with Priest, it hurts your opponent a lot more than it's gonna hurt you. Warrior probably wouldn't be a bad option. You could go with as well. Paladin not so much because you gotta use spells generally for it. And you can, I mean, it could be decent in like a Healadin, I guess, if you're trying to go for that again. We noticed that never worked, which made me sad. So overall, it's just kind of an iffy card. I'm going to go 5 out of 10. And most likely you'll see it in maybe a Priest or Warlock, but maybe not any specific kind of deck. Might just be experimentation, would be my guess of maybe where you're going to see it, but you probably won't see it around much. Catherine Ritualist. 3 cost, 4/4 with Taunt. Battlecry, add a random 4 cost minion to your opponent's hand. Every time I see this card, like, I've been playing a bit, and the game has kind of given options in the Discover pool, obviously, of, like, when you're doing taunt stuff. And it's like, this is an option, and I'm just like, I say no every time, because it's not good. A 3 cost 4/4 with Taunt could very well likely be canceled out by that random 4 cost minion that your opponent got. So basically what ends up happening is you end up using one of your 30 cards in your deck to die to a card that didn't start in your opponent's deck. So they basically lose nothing for that. You just lose a card and they lose nothing. You maybe can get a face hit off, but you are not playing this in an aggro deck most likely. Because it has Taunt, and it's giving your opponent a 4 cost minion to probably deal with it. I don't see it. Mukla is so much better. Because it's a 3 cost 5/5 that just gives your opponent 2 bananas. 2 bananas are minor. It's helpful to your opponent, but it's still minor, so it makes it completely worth it. More than this guy ever will. I'm giving this guy a 2 out of 10, and you will not see him this expansion. You may never see him in any expansion, to be honest. We got a Parade Leader, though. A 2 cost 2/3 after you summon a Rush minion. Give a +2 attack. Very situational for the type of deck that you're going to run. Most likely it's not like a specific Rush deck. Most likely going to be like, it would go into like a control deck that maybe has a lot of rush minions or something. But then you have to kind of force yourself to put rush stuff in, which just makes this bad. Because it forces a certain thing into your deck that you maybe don't necessarily need. So then you're just going to take them out. It's like, well, I don't... Because you're like, oh yeah, I'll throw them in. And then you make your deck. And then you're like, man, I actually really don't have that many rush minions in here. So then you throw out both parade leaders and add something that's actually useful. So I'm going to go 4 out of 10 on this one. And you probably won't see him around. We got a prize vendor. 2 cost, 2/3 Murloc Battlecry. Both players draw a card. I think this is a pretty good card for an aggro deck. Because you need cards probably way more than your opponent in an aggro deck. I don't think that there's enough support for Murloc. But some kind of aggro deck I think it can very well go into. So I'm going to give this... I'm going to give this card a 7 out of 10. And type of decks, I think it could go into like a... It could maybe go into Demon Hunter. Might be a little slow for Demon Hunter, but I mean, it's a card draw that you maybe want. Or an aggro Secret Mage. Or an aggro Hunter. With secrets, I mean. Aggro Secret Hunter. It could maybe go into. It's honestly got some good options. We got the Rock Rager. 2 cost, 5/1 elemental with taunt. I mean, it's okay. That's really all I got for it. Better than Magma Elemental by miles. Magma Elemental is exact same stats but costs 1 more and doesn't have taunt. Like, I love that they keep doing this Rager thing every expansion. It's fantastic. I love it. Because it just... Well, I wouldn't say it's every expansion that they've been doing it, but they do Ragers a lot, and I like it. At some point, there's going to be enough for, like, a Rager deck. Where it's just a bunch of elementals that are Ragers in Wild, and then you have, like, some elemental spells to buff them. And the spell is just called the Ragers Rage On or something. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think it's bad. It's just most likely not going to be used. Because it gets pinged by Fire Blast for Mage, for example. So against any Mage matchup, it's bad then. Most likely we go to Mage because elementals. So basically in a mirror matchup, it kind of falls short. So I mean I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 10. And then I don't think, sadly you probably won't see this expansion unless you do see it in that elemental grand finale deck. But I don't think it's gonna go in, sadly. We got the Safety Inspector. 1 cost, 1/3 Battlecry. Shuffle the lowest cost card from your hand into your deck. You draw a card. I still hate this card. I've looked at it many times, and I still don't get what the point of it is. Because good later. Like, it's a lot better later in the game, obviously. But then a 1/3 is not good later in the game. A 1/3 is a pretty solid turn 1 move, but then he's going to shuffle probably your 2-cost card back into your deck, and now you have no play for turn 2. He ruins everything. You might as well play a 1-cost 1/3 with no text, because this guy sucks. He's fine later in the matchup, but he's terrible early, and that's where he should be better because of the stats he has. I'm going 3 out of 10, and you will probably not see him around. We got the Showstopper. 2 cost, 3/2 Death Rattle. You silence all minions. Funniest thing about this is if you silence the silence, but mostly because it's a Death Rattle, it's a little slow, which makes it a little harder for him. Because most silence stuff you see is either a spell or generally Battlecry. It being a death rattle, it makes it a little harder because you don't see that very much. Or like at all, I should say. So I mean it's not bad. It's necessary for some stuff. Does it bring back Silence Priest? Absolutely not. Sadly. Most likely it's used to like counter a bunch of the other stuff that you see around for some of the that have good abilities, like the Druid one, the Warrior Gore dude from last expansion, because he doesn't die for like a long time otherwise. It's fine. But most likely the silence all minions is just gonna silence like one thing. The one thing that you care about. Priest just has much better silence options, so most likely it would never go in there because Priest just has 0 cost silence a minion. Why wouldn't you use that instead? But what if there's a bunch of minions? They got Mass Dispel as well. They have Priest has a lot of silence options. So if stuff that needs to be silenced becomes an issue, Priest will start rising to the top of the meta, and then people will stop using those stuff that can be silenced, and then Priest will fall back down in the meta, and then something else will take over. This generally is, it's okay. I'm just gonna go with it's okay. 5 out of 10. You might see it around, you might not. I don't have too much to say. Let's just move on to a gross abomination, the Wriggling Horror. 2 cost, 2/1 battlecry, give adjacent minions +1/+1. It's not bad value. +1/+1 is decent, especially since it's giving a total of +2/+2, which is a bit more than you expect from a 2 cost minion. And well, obviously you're not going to play it on curve unless you're going hyper aggressive and you play like Hunter and you played Alley Cat turn 1, they didn't die. You play Wriggling Horror in between them on turn 2, and you're just going. New Face Hunter strats right there, except if you're playing Face Hunter, if you have Toxic Reinforcements turn 1, you'll probably do that instead. So it's not a bad card. It's just kind of in a weird spot. Because you're not going to play it on curve, because the battle cry probably won't work on curve. So most likely you're going to play turn 3 or 4. Which then the 2/1 is easily going to die. And really you just gave +2/+2 for 2. But also your opponent's spending mana to kill it off. So it's in just like a weird spot, to be honest. So I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. Because it's okay. It's not great, but it's okay. And type of deck you'll see it in, I'm not 100% sure. It could be in like a hyper aggressive Hunter deck like I was talking about, where you play some minion that spawns 2 minions and then you throw something in between. Otherwise, it could just be there because it's got a decent amount of value, so it gets thrown into some control deck. Probably not, because it's too small for a control deck, but we'll see. Alright, we got this dude. Salius Darkmoon, 7 cost, 4/4, battlecry, choose a direction to rotate all minions. It's just a weird card, I tell you. Because you're never... Like, it's only for 1 turn, it rotates, but it's still just weird. Like, you need to make up so much stuff if you rotate. Like, you have to rotate something bad and you have to take something good from your opponent. Which, obviously, it has to be really good, because this is only a 7 cost 4/4. So it needs to really make up for that. Which, I think most of the time, it's not gonna do. So I just don't think this works. It's a cool mechanic, but just The card itself is just a little lacking. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. And I don't think you're going to see it around, to be honest. You might see it a little bit for experimentation purposes because, you know, everybody got it. But otherwise, it's just kind of meh. Okay, now we got Cthulhu the Shattered. So, start of the game, he breaks into 4 pieces. He's a 10 cost 6/6. He's also got a battle cry of when he's all together. Deals 30 damage randomly split among all enemies. So, once you play his 4 pieces, Cthulhu the Shattered gets shuffled actually into your deck. It doesn't go in your hand, it gets shuffled into your deck. So really you have to draw Cthulhu, technically Cthulhu, 5 times. Still, not a fan of it, because when you draw Cthulhu cards, you still get a relatively good thing to do. Like we have the Eye of Cthulhu, which deals 7 damage randomly split among all enemies. Heart of Cthulhu, dealing 3 damage to all minions. Body of Cthulhu, which gives you a 6/6 with taunt. And the Maw of Cthulhu, which destroys a minion, so basically an assassinate. And then once you get him, you basically win. Which I hate instant win cards like this. But if you put this in any kind of control deck, you basically win. Because once you draw him, you will most likely be able to kill your opponent with that battle cry. Because that is the point that it's going for. Because the 10 cost 6/6 is very small, but the battle cry is so worth it that of course you're going to do it. So if you have a super control deck, and then you throw Cthulhu in there, he will help your deck significantly. Because all you have to do is make sure you finish control the board the whole time, and just get to Cthulhu, and you'll win. Which is why I don't like Cthulhu cards. But you'll probably see him around. And he's honestly very strong. So I still have to put him at like a 9 out of 10, even though I really don't want to. So 9 out of 10. Type deck will see him in basically any control. Probably will just throw him in if they have him. Because any control deck that doesn't throw him in will basically lose. Because then let's say it's control against control. One player has Cthulhu in his control deck while the other one does not. You're both evenly controlling the board. And it looks like the one dude without Cthulhu is starting to take advantage, and the other guy plops down Cthulhu, kills your board, and most likely will kill you too, because it's later in the game and you've probably taken at least like 10 damage. So you're probably dead too. No way you've taken no damage, I'm guessing. You are probably now dead because he played Cthulhu and you don't have Cthulhu. Anyway, we got N'Zoth, God of the Deep, 10 cost 5/7, Battlecry, resurrect a friendly minion of each minion type. Most likely this is only useful in like one or two decks, which I'll get to a bit more. Resurrecting friendly minion types is just kind of weird. Very good with the Circus Amalgam because he counts as anything. So there's another use for him, of course, as well. So obviously, I think he's only useful in like Resurrection Priest, possibly, because even Resurrection Priest doesn't use too many different minion types. And then I think he's a shoo-in for the Menagerie Warrior. Because the Menagerie Warrior is a deck with a lot of minion types. So I think N'Zoth, God of the Deep, makes a lot of sense for that deck. I think overall the card's just kind of meh, though, to be honest, because he's only useful in certain decks and doesn't have too much flexibility, sadly. So I am going to give him, I'm going to give him a 6 out of 10, because he's good, but he's only good in certain situations. So 6 out of 10. Type of deck will probably just be the Menagerie Warrior. There's the possibility of the Resurrection Priest, but most likely not the Resurrection Priest. We got Yogg Saron, Master of Fate. 10 cost, 7/5 legendary. You know what the legendary thing looks like. This is a legendary, this is a legendary, this is a legendary, and this guy's a legendary. There you go. You're welcome. So the Master of Fate. So we got the wheel here. So you have 5 options that have a 19% chance of being landed on, and 1 option that has a 5% chance of landing on. So a total of 6 options. So let's go over all of them except for that first one at the moment. So we have the ones that are like lit up. So the last 5 are the 19% chance. The one that is dim, the Rod of Roasting, is the only one with the 5% chance. We'll get to that one last. We got the Hand of Fate. So we have fill your hand with random spells that cost 0 this turn. We have the Curse of Flesh. Fill your board with random minions. Then you give your minions rush. We get the Mind Flayer Goggles. You take control of 3 random enemy minions. We have the Mystery Box, which is the normal Yogg thing, which is casting a spell for every spell you've cast this game. Targets are chosen randomly. And then you have Devouring Hunger. Destroy all other minions, gain their attack and health. And we have the Rod of Roasting, which is cast Pyroblast randomly until someone dies. So basically, there's a 5% chance that Yogg decides it's time to end this game. Let me randomly pick who wins, and my goodness, it can be crazy. Yogg is always a super fun time. A lot of those are honestly very good options. I'd say the only bad options are Rod of Roasting. Curse of Flesh isn't that great, and Mystery Box can be way too random. Mind Flayer Goggles will always be good. Devouring Hunger will always be good, and Hand of Fate will always be good. Mystery Box can sometimes be good. Curse of Flesh most likely will not. That's the one that worries me the most, is the Curse of Flesh, because it's random minions for both sides. Just yours get rushed. Yes, you get to pick what it attacks. Even Yogg gets rush. But your opponent can just get a bunch of big stuff, and you can get a bunch of small stuff, and boom, you're screwed by Yogg. So most of the time, you'll actually get you'll get good stuff out of Yogg. Most likely. That being said, there's still those downsides that can happen. So if you get screwed over by Yogg, most people will probably get upset, but it's bound to happen. It can very well happen, and it probably will happen. But I like the card. I think it's relatively good because the pros really do outweigh the cons. There's way more good options than bad options, to be honest, and I really like it. Hand of Fate is honestly amazing. Devouring Hunger is absolutely incredible. Mind Flayer Goggles is super good. It's just, there's a lot of good stuff. So I think it's honestly a pretty good card. It's just sometimes difficult to get those 10 spells off. In a control deck, it's generally not. So you can probably play Yogg and Cthulhu in the same control type deck, possibly. So I'm going to give Yogg, the Master of Fate, 7 out of 10. Type of deck, probably control. Then we have Yasharaj, there we go. The Defiled. 10 cost, 10/10, legendary. Battlecry, you add a copy of each corrupted card you've played this game to your hand. Cost 0 this turn. This is another card that honestly could very well go into the clown deck. Because you get your corrupted clown back if they die, and then you play them again probably right after you play Yashiraj. So you'll have a board of 6 4/4 taunt clowns, and then a 10 cost 10/10. And even if you don't play the clown that turn, you got probably other corrupted card options as well, because you might play. Because you have this in your deck, you'll probably add some other corrupted card options to your hand for more value as well. So, because even if you don't play the clown that turn, let's say your board gets wiped once you play Yashiraj, so you have the clown in your hand, then you play it the next turn once your board is wiped. Because Yashiraj is scary. It's a 10 cost 10/10 with a huge battle cry. Your opponent maybe thinks, oh yeah, they might have played everything. Or they're just like, oh, they got the clown in their hand. I can't clear the board now. Except they have to clear the board, otherwise they'd probably take a lot of damage or even possibly die. So honestly, this card is very good, very big. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Type of deck you'll see it in, most likely you're going to see it in probably like the clown deck. And then you could also very well likely see it in like a control deck, because it gives a lot of value as well. And the control deck will probably have lots of corrupted stuff then too. Like the priest corrupted one especially. That's very decent in a control deck. That's just the one that I thought of right off the top of my head. And that is all the cards. All the neutrals, all the class cards, that's everything. Plan is next week. I shouldn't say next week because this might be out that week. The plan is for the week of, what is that going to be? December 4, that Friday. Kind of that week there is kind of get some Wind Waker maybe started back up. If not, then next week for sure. See you all around. That was good. And I'll see you next time for Wind Waker then.